Welcome back to the Classical Music Podcast. I am Brigitte Balzat, and today we're doing something a little bit different. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself today. The reason being is that firstly, this will be the last episode for this year, although there is not so much left of the year to go, but due to COVID restrictions and lockdown rules that are forever changing, and just to be as safe as possible, and also to realize that maybe now is a good time to just do nothing and recharge for the new year that hopefully will bring some better days. So that is the reason why there will be a small break, but hopefully not for too long. And the first thing I want to say really is just a huge thank you for all the support that this podcast has received so far. I feel incredibly blessed, and I'm so glad that the response has been very positive, and I'm glad that everybody is enjoying it so far. And in light of that, if you are enjoying this and you want to see more, then please go ahead and like and subscribe and share with your friends. That really does go a long way, and I would very much appreciate it. So basically, I'm just going to talk about myself, and I'm not exactly used to it, and it's going to be an interesting process, but let's dig into it. So to start with, I suppose the best place to start is where I'm from. I'm from Auckland, New Zealand. That's where I was born, to a family of German immigrants, and I'm the child number 5 out of 7 kids. And now I have 7 nieces and nephews as well, so quite a big family. And I lived there until I was 21 years old, and now I live here in Hanover, Germany. Let's go back a bit and talk a little bit about my early days and how music became part of my life. I remember there being music around from the very beginning. For example, I distinctly remember waking up early in the morning and hearing my mother practicing the piano early as in the morning before we all had to start schoolwork and so on. So yeah, my mom is a pianist, and she taught all of us kids everything, from schoolwork to instruments to everything. My father, he taught himself how to play the guitar and the piano, and it makes me very happy when I hear him play. So it was always apparent in my very early days. I heard music everywhere I went, and all my siblings were also playing instruments from a very young age, mostly piano, but we also had guitar, flute, violin, cello. It was fantastic. Yeah, I think I began to play the piano around 2 or 3 years old. Not long after that, I was begging my parents for a violin. And so I began the violin at age 5, I believe. So now it will be almost 20 years. Me and all my siblings, we were homeschooled by my mother, which is quite strange to some people, and especially here in Germany, it's not even legal, I think, to do that. So I understand that it can be a very strange concept for a lot of people, but for us it was great because, well, first of all, I have a lot of siblings, so it wasn't like I was completely alone, and I always had somebody to rely on or to ask questions or to learn from, which was actually really even cooler because you're in like a class of many different levels, so you can really see like how things develop rather than just only your class and your level at the one time. But the best part about homeschooling back then was the freedom to explore your interests. This was a hugely impactful thing for me because I remember as a child, even still very young, I had interest in so many different fields, and that carried on for quite a long time. And I was so grateful to have that time to not be at school for the whole day so that I could explore those interests. And not all of them led to something outstanding or substantial, but they were passions that I still hold dear to me to this day. For example, at also the age of 5, I started ballet. What 5-year-old girl doesn't dream of being a ballerina? I don't know. But that also happened, and I was so passionate about dancing, you cannot imagine. I was dancing everywhere. And it got to the point where when I was around 11, 12, I was in some fancy school and on scholarship with all these private school students, and I was the only homeschooler there. And I was doing ballet, I was doing jazz, I was doing tap, I was doing contemporary, I was doing hip hop. What else did I do? A bit of funk. I did also a little bit of ballroom at some point. I did everything and I loved it. And for me, still to this day, dance is a hugely connected to classical music. I think I was actually just watching earlier today Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker ballet by the Mariinsky Theater, and it's just incredible. This combination of movement, strength, power, and beauty, and agility, and there's so much that goes into this art form, and for me, still to this day, I find it so incredibly inspiring, especially as a musician and as an artist. It's always been something that's I will always feel connected to somehow, and that was really a huge part of my childhood, and being on stage and performing in such a completely different way to classical music, but yet still connected. I think that really enriched my musicianship and performanceship, even from a very young age. And I'm incredibly grateful for that opportunity. It was wonderful, and one that I was very sad to walk away from, actually, which, funnily enough, was indeed my decision. And I remember it being a decision that I knew was going to be very impactful, and I knew that it was a big decision and a tough one to make because I was so passionate about dance. But it came up that I then wanted to go and start trampolining, which is, not so many people know about it. It's like gymnastics but on Olympic trampolines. They're massive, they're incredibly stretchy, so you can jump very, very high, and gymnastics on a trampoline basically. And I was obsessed from the beginning, before I even started. But my mother said that I cannot do both dance and trampoline, and she was right. I mean, doing dancing and violin, there was just not enough time in the day. So she was completely right, even though I was devastated about having to make that decision. But I did, and I was around 12, I think, when I had to make the decision. And I decided to quit all the dance, and I jumped straight into trampolining. This was a very different experience than the ballet world that I was so used to and so involved in. And not only just in society, but the level of skill and the way that you move your body and the way you're using your mind. It's yes, of course, similar, but very, very different at the same time. And that was a really interesting experience for me, to jump in the deep end and just quit everything and completely change, especially at that age. And little did I know that it would be a fantastic decision for me also at the end of the day, because again, going back to society, and I think this is something that has always been very apparent in my life, especially, that the society that is around certain art forms is so contrasting, and what you can learn from each has been an incredible journey for me. And it's been very much a huge part of not just the art forms that I have done and been involved with, but seeing how the society molds that art form to be what it is in our society today. And I really already felt that as a very young child. And what I mean by this is that, for example, this ballet school that I came from, as I said, it was a private school. I was homeschooled, I was the weird girl, bit of an outsider, which I didn't care. I just loved to dance. This was not really a big issue, although at that age it feels like a little bit. And going from this kind of a bit more hostile, competitive environment to such a friendly and supportive environment in the trampolining world was such a huge contrast to me, and I will never forget it because I made lifelong friends at the trampolining club. It was such a shock to me that in such a society, in a small environment, that people could be so supportive and understanding and also uplifting, This I had not really seen a lot before somehow. And not only that, but having to train your body and your mind in a very specific way. I always wanted to do that for a long time because I wanted that kind of extreme training and mental strength training and all that kind of thing. I was always very fascinated by it. But really being in it, I didn't realize how much I would have learned from that until, of course, you get a bit older and you reflect and you realize all the little things that you've learned along the way, which is really incredible. And but for me, actually, the biggest thing that I took away from trampolining was, well, first of all, understanding my body and its capabilities, its boundaries, what kind of just a completely different kind of skill. And I think as a musician, I feel so grateful that I've been through that, because you don't really think about your body as a whole so often as a musician. When you're practicing a certain part, you're thinking only about the music or your fingers, but it's really the whole body is all involved. And that's something I really learned with my ballet and trampolining and extreme sport kind of background. It wasn't until much later that I realized how to transform it into the music side of things, but I talk about it because I know that it did play a huge role in my life and in my musicianship journey, let's say. So yeah, and learning, how to stay calm in your mind and just know and trust yourself, trust in the work that you have done. And when it comes to the competition or the stage, you trust yourself and you just let it go and see what happens, because that's all you can do. If you overthink, then you actually will hurt yourself. And that, I think, is the huge difference, is that you don't have a choice but to trust yourself. Otherwise, things can really go wrong. And they did quite a few times, I have to say. And that's also one of the reasons why I ended up quitting trampolining as well, because I then started high school, which meant I didn't have enough time to train and practice and so on. So my time just got less and less, and I realized that I was not developing in the way that I was before when I had the time, and it became frustrating and not productive. And so I decided to finally quit, on top of many injuries that came with it that were also kind of warning signs to say, okay, if you want to be a musician or you want to do other things in your life, now is the time to stop before you do any kind of permanent damage. So luckily, I did give that up as well. During all this time, since I was around, I don't know what age, I mean, performance has been part of my life since before I can remember. I mean, we, as a family, we would put on mini concerts at Christmas time at our home. And this is how kind of things started to, the ball got rolling and it started to develop. After a few years, when more and more of us started to perform and became a bigger ordeal, there would be dance shows, or I did like a clown dance one time, also playing violin and piano, singing something. It was like really a show extravaganza in a family home for the grandparents. And it soon got bigger and bigger and bigger. And soon we could not fit everybody in our house anymore. So then we started to take it a bit further, and we started to book venues, and we started to play a bit more in the public, and it just grew and grew and grew, and to the point where we were doing annual concerts every year for charity, where there would be thousands of people showing up, and we would put on a huge show with dances, with singing, with costume, we did everything. It was fantastic. It was such an amazing time, and it was such a great way to incorporate all the different areas that I was passionate about as well, and my siblings as well, and to give a show at the end of the year and show what we've been working on. And I think that's an incredible, I mean, I know that I am so privileged to have had these experiences so far, and I know that not everyone can, and I really do value all the experiences that I had growing up. And I think especially in growing up in New Zealand, you're fortunate enough anyway to be born there and to live there. It's a wonderful country, but I know that it's not like that in every country, and I feel very, very grateful for the experiences that I have had. And following on from that, so we had these extravagant concerts every year. All our friends and family and extras would come, and it was wonderful. It was really something I look forward to every year, and it was incredible. And following from that, then we started to book a lot of gigs and other concerts, and eventually we started to do tours to America, to Fiji, and to Europe also. We did also a tour in Australia. I think we went everywhere, and it was such a cool, it just, the way it developed was just brilliant, because it started just us playing some random pieces together, doing what we do, and then it turned into really like a band. And we played kind of Irish fiddle music fusion. It was a bit of a mix, so a lot of people would call us the Kelly family or the Von Trapp family, or there were many names circling around that what people called us. But it was incredible, especially to be able to work and perform with your family is a very special experience to have, because it's a connection that does not need words. And I think that is kind of the most beautiful part about music in general, is it's the fact that it's not words, it's feeling, it's harmony, it's an underlying emotion and feeling that is not often seen on the outside. And we were so blessed with the experiences that we had, especially as a family, and to be able to see so many parts of the world and bring music and bring joy to those that didn't often get to see that kind of thing. For example, a very memorable experience with the Belzats, was the family band. Was one time, I'm sure it was in Germany, I can't remember where it was, but we were doing a tour and we were playing at a hospital. And we were playing outside the hospital. And we did a set, and we played a whole concert. And after the concert, one of the nurses came out to us and kind of like crying and emotional. And she came and she told us that our music woke somebody up from a coma. And hearing that news, I mean, you're not doing anything special. At least you don't feel like it, especially when you're young and you're just playing with your family some tunes. You're just like, well, we're here in Europe and we're playing a concert. It's great. But then when you hear that you've actually woken somebody up from a coma, and imagine their families, how happy they will be. Like, this is incredible. The power that music has is just unbelievable. And I have been so grateful and privileged to have experienced these moments firsthand. And I think that's a huge part of what keeps me going even now in these difficult times, is knowing that it really does move and touch people and do magical things sometimes. And I mean, how can you stop doing something like that, that gives you these experiences and emotions and feelings that you just don't really get anywhere else? And it's just magical. Yeah, so that was also a huge part of my childhood, and there was a lot of performance stage and projects and competitions and whatever. There was a lot going on. And all during this time, I was also very much into art. I was very much into painting and drawing for a long time, also some sculpture. I took 2 art classes in school, and this was a huge passion of mine as well. I was very much into fashion design, and I really wanted to go into that at some point. This is where we get to the somehow studying music part, because I actually wanted to study fashion design, and I was very passionate about it, and I love to make clothes and create something that's truly unique and really make it with my hands. But the reason I did not do that in the end was mainly because of high school. And my high school experience, it doesn't matter so much. Everyone has their own high school experience. Mine only lasted 2 years, so I shouldn't complain. But I went to an all-girls high school. I really hated it there. I really hated it. But what I didn't hate was the fact that during these 2 years, I was very, very lucky to have 3 amazing musicians there with me, and we formed a quartet, and this quartet was something so special. I cannot believe still to this day how much dedication and work we put into this quartet at this age. We were 15, I suppose. And this quartet really changed a lot for me, especially when it comes to classical music, because before starting with this new quartet, I was still involved and trained in classical music, but that was not really my main focus or anything at that point. It was really much on the sidelines, as any typical teenager would have put it, I suppose. But and of course I had so many other performing experiences. There was, you know, the band and dancing, and I had everything else, so I was feeling fulfilled, I suppose. But with classical, I actually never really felt very comfortable playing classical violin. I was kind of tensed up for some reason, as opposed to when I would play something a bit more free and fun. I would be completely free. But when it came to classical, I would always kind of freeze up, and it was not as easy for me to perform. And so I guess that's why I was not so passionate about it when I was younger, because I didn't really understand, I suppose. But then, working with this quartet, we entered the National Chamber competition in New Zealand for secondary schools, and we actually won it twice. And first of all, the first time we won it, I broke my E string. I think I told this story once before, but I broke my E string, and we were halfway through the first movement of Death and the Maiden, and we were only playing one movement for the final. And in this moment, I will still never forget how I felt in this moment. It was terrifying. I just, you know, I knew I have a split second to decide what to do somehow. At least this is how I felt. And I decided to just continue somehow making it up on the spot. And while not everybody in the quartet agreed with my decision, you know, you can't really, this is the beauty about chamber music, you just have to go with the flow and see what happens somehow. So that's what we did, and to my huge surprise, we won. And this is what kind of hit me really strongly, because I thought, how is that even possible? Because there is still a recording somewhere out today where you can hear me playing a solo on just an out of tune A string, just playing A over and over again. It's horrible. We should not have won, but we did. And for me, that kind of gave me a bit of hope as a musician, because it kind of showed that they saw true musicianship regardless of what happened. And experiencing that and going through all the emotions of thinking it was all over to winning, and then understanding why, it was incredible. And I realized, okay, well, this is a feeling that I will not find in any other field. And then I just decided to go for it, because I thought that this is unexplainable somehow. At least it felt like to me. So that was another huge reason why I decided to study classical music. And so yeah, that was one of the main reasons. The other one being that I hated school so much that I just wanted to leave, and that's also why I didn't pursue the design career and went for music, because I was very luckily accepted 1 week before semester started at the University of Waikato. And so I just went there. A week later, I moved to a different city, and I was 17 years old, and I just then started my bachelor. And that's kind of, I feel like I fell into it somehow. But I think sometimes that's the best way to get into anything, is just to fall in and go with everything that you have without any kind of preconceptions or expectations, I suppose. And that's what I did. And yeah, it was definitely a scary experience at that time, but also I knew that I was very happy to be away from high school. So I thought, okay, this is much better, and I was definitely a lot happier. Yeah, so that's early childhood done. Then we get into the study part. I studied my Bachelor of Violin Performance with Dr. Lara Hall at the Waikato University, and I was there for 3 years. The biggest thing that I learned, I suppose, was gaining that confidence to perform classical music on stage, and to really find my way to be as free as possible. And this university was the perfect place for that freedom and that kind of chance to learn that, because in this particular institution they were very heavily focused on chamber music, which is what I had just been doing and I felt very confident in, so that went very well with my ideals, let's say. And the other thing is that they had performances all the time, so you could perform up to 3 times a week if you wanted, or if you were ready to. They had performances in retirement homes. We had performances in the museum, in another retirement home. There was a Wednesday lunchtime concert, and every Friday there was a performance hour where all the students would come. The singers, pianists. I mean, there were not so many. It was about probably 50 people or more. So yeah, but being able to just, even if you were not quite ready, having that opportunity to put yourself out there and just perform and see what's going to happen and get over that kind of fear, that was very impactful for me. And it was something I really desperately needed to go through, because as I said before, I was very shy when it came to classical music and performing anything kind of serious. I always froze up. So in this place, I really threw myself out there and tried my best to not get these jitters and not be nervous, and just enjoyed the performance as I would have in dance or with my band, or you get the idea. So that was an incredible experience for me. I'm definitely losing my English. That was an incredible experience for me. Yeah, I would say this would be my biggest takeaway from my bachelor. Of course, when entering and really starting, there was a huge freak out period where I realized that, oh, I have not really been focusing on my violin for quite some time, because I was distracted with other things. So there was a lot of insecurity and feeling very behind everybody else. And that was something that I also had to kind of go through and just deal with and get out of, because at the end of the day, that is just your own kind of insecurities. Maybe, yes, I could have prepared better, but it was too late. I just had to dive in and just go. And so going from playing violin kind of relaxed, or so to say, to full-time studying was a huge change, and a very good one at that. And it really pushed me to test my limits as a musician, to see how much can I work, how hard, and what can I dive into, and what can I learn to get on that level that I want to be, where that people were at before I was, let's say. And that was a good kind of kick up the butt to start seeing classical music in a different way and really taking it as serious as possible. After my bachelor, well, there was a slight crossover period where I was studying with 2 different teachers. But anyway, after my bachelor, I then moved back to Auckland and started to study with Stephen Larson, where I was studying with him for 1 year just, and did my honours degree at Auckland University. And I have talked a little bit about this before, and I mean, I praise Mr. Stephen Larson to the highest of levels. I think he's an incredible teacher and definitely a huge asset to the classical music scene in New Zealand. I think he's doing wonderful things, and I feel very lucky that I was able to learn from him, even if it was just for a short time. And what I learned with him, that for me, like, I kind of see my development as a musician in kind of 3 chunks in terms of my bachelor and the different degrees. I kind of can categorize what I've learned from each degree, so to say. So for the first one, it was really like just opening up. For my bachelor, it was just opening up and seeing what the possibilities are, and letting myself be kind of drawn into this classical world and really dive deep into it and see what do I need to learn, what do I need to know. This was really the beginning. And then realizing that there was so much that I needed to learn, and it was quite overwhelming. And then coming to Stephen Larson, this I call my kind of enlightenment period. even if it was just 2 years with him, because we really went completely back to basics. Now, I had just almost finished my bachelor, and when I had a lesson before I started with studying with Stephen, I had a lesson with him, and he said, "Yeah, we have to go completely back to the basics. No playing, start from scratch." And of course, back then, this was devastating news. I thought, oh my goodness, what am I doing? I'm almost finished my bachelor and I feel like I have to restart everything. And it was a terrifying experience. But at the end of the day, I trusted him and I decided, okay, that's what I'm going to do. Although I didn't do it completely like that because I had to finish my bachelor at the same time. So that was a bit complicated, but we made it work. So I had one teacher that we were doing Abschluss final exam work, and the other that was literally just picking up the violin and putting it down for about 3 lessons, just learning how to hold the violin. And this was mainly due to some injury that I was having in my shoulder and neck, but also just bad technique in general. So with Stephen, we kind of re-sculpted everything that I had learned in a much more efficient and productive and practical way. And these lessons and the things that I learned from Stephen, I still practice every day when I'm practicing my violin. I still think about these fundamental building blocks that we work through together. And this, I think, that's why I call it the enlightenment period of my career, because it was really once I realized the mechanics of how the violin worked and understanding in a much more detailed and scientific, I suppose, way, and that I had never kind of seen that side of classical music or being a violinist before. So that was really enlightening and really eye-opening and a huge challenge at the same time, but incredible. And I was just soaking up as much information that I could, because I knew this is what I've been missing for so many years, being distracted with all these other things. And then I finally found, okay, these are the tools that I need to continue now. And that was amazing. And he helped me prepare to move here. Yeah, so Stephen helped me prepare to come here and audition, which we did. And I have talked about this a little bit before during this time there was also a lot of health issues and so on, but we already talked about that, so we don't need to go there. Yeah, so we prepared together and I came here and I auditioned for Elisabeth Couvrat here in Hanover. And I had actually met her at a masterclass before, actually at the same time I met Stephen. And so we'd known each other quite a while before I came here and decided to audition. And so I auditioned and I won the place, and I was incredibly excited because for a New Zealander to get out of New Zealand is quite a big thing. And it's not as easy as one would think, right? It's not as easy as I thought, for sure. And I know that so many do not have the opportunities that I have had, that especially in the classical music world in New Zealand. I mean, to get out of New Zealand and experience a new culture in classical music, it costs a lot of money, first of all, because it's so far away. Trying to find context, it feels like an impossible game, and you're just too far away and too distant, and that really is a thing that people struggle with a lot. And yeah, and it's not easy. So I feel very, very lucky that I was able to have a somewhat secure and easy way to get here. And I'm really hoping that we can make it somehow easier for the young musicians in New Zealand to be able to come and travel and experience different musical cultures, different types of teaching, because it's so worth it. The biggest learning experience moving to Germany, completing my master's, what was the biggest impact on me was seeing the different cultures, seeing how much broader classical music can be and is, and the different and taking the different spices of the different cultures that you have here in Europe. This is something you don't really get to experience in New Zealand. I don't know, I feel like I really learned a much more personal and deeper side to music by coming here. I feel like I got to get a little bit inside the minds of the different cultures to understand composers better, to understand scores, to understand the history of classical music much better. And I think this is really important because the history of classical music, I mean, it's so deep. It's like an iceberg, you see this beautiful piece or violinist or whatever, you see the picture of what classical music is, but the base, how deep it goes, and all the fundamentals and small parts that come together to make it what you see on the outside. It goes without end, and while that can be frustrating at times, it's also the most beautiful part about being a musician and classical music itself, because there is no end to what you can discover, and it's that is should be a beautiful thing, because at least for me, I get very bored if I complete something, then I'm like, well, what's next? And so I guess for me then classical music or music in general is the perfect field for me at the end of the day, because it does continue always, and there are always new ways to develop, and it's just an endless journey, and the more you work at it, the more satisfying it becomes also at the end of the day. So yeah, that's basically my musical journey, my background, growing up, and how I came here. I guess post studies, this is the most challenging time to be a musician, I think, is when you finish all your studies and the question comes, now what? And of course, I like everyone else, I freaked out around my Abschluss. Thought, oh my goodness, okay, I do this big concert and I prepare and I get it done, and then what? What's gonna happen? It's terrifying. It really is. And unless you already have something set up before you finished, or I don't know, I think it's always going to be scary. And it's very normal, but I didn't realize how much it would impact me until it did. And I had a few months with nothing to do, basically, and it was summer, so at least I could relax and have a small holiday after finishing my Abschluss. But then I was very fortunate to get this job in Klassische Philharmonie Bonn, which I have also talked about before. And again, I have said that this was also an incredible experience. And now, for me, it's really the time to just find myself, with lack of a better way to explain it. It's just finding yourself. You have all the tools. I feel like I have all the tools. I've taken little bits from everything that I've experienced so far, and I now just need to kind of organize them in the way that I want. And this is the biggest challenge, I suppose. I feel, I have also said this before, but I feel very fortunate to have had this year actually to really take time to find myself. I know it sounds very cheesy, but it's really as simple as that. And you're just discovering what your voice is and what you want to say and why you want to say it. And it's not just about making something beautiful. It's so much more than that. It's really communicating and telling your story, and we all have a story. I just told you mine. Yeah, it's communicating, it's telling that story, and the only way to do that is to really know yourself what your story is. And I guess that's also why I decided to do this podcast, because yeah, in some ways I think I'm almost finding myself through these podcast episodes. And it's really, it's not only just for the viewers and to enjoy ourselves, but there really is a purpose behind what I'm doing. I want to find my own voice, and I want to be able to share it, and it's something I'm passionate about. I read a quote earlier this year. I'm not entirely sure where it's from. I'm sure it's very famous. I can't remember where I saw it, but there was a quote that said, "Create the things that you wish existed." And that really hit home for me, and that's really why I wanted to do this in the first place, because I wish that when I was younger there would be something like this for me to watch. We need to push for a better world somehow, in every tiny way that we can. It just takes one little step, it takes one spark of an idea. It's not going to be, it's always going to be a developing thing, and if I can play a small role in that, then I will be very grateful, and I hope that I inspire others to do their part as well, because it's not a one-man job. We all need to pull together and support each other. We need to. And so, without further ado, I wish you all a very Merry Christmas somehow and a good break, and I will see you in the new year. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends, and see you next year.